Can you please check if the rope is tied properly? Daniel asked, and his hand hovered near her back. I think it's loose. Victoria bent down to look, and in that split second, Daniel's face twisted into something dark, something evil, and without hesitation, he shoved her with both hands, hard and merciless. She gasped as her body flew forward, and the world tilted violently before the cold water swallowed her whole. The shock stole her breath, and she went under, flailing desperately because she couldn't understand what had just happened. When she surfaced, gasping and choking, she saw Daniel staring down at her from the boat, and his face was blank, emotionless, like he was watching a stranger drown. Daniel, she screamed, and her voice cracked with terror. Help me, please. He said nothing. He just stood there watching her struggle, and then he smiled, a cold, satisfied smile. And he turned away and steered the boat further out, leaving her alone in the middle of the river. This was the man she had trusted with everything. The man she had loved for 7 years. The man who had brought her medication every morning with a kiss and a smile. And now, as the water pulled her under, Victoria realized with horrifying clarity, those pills weren't medicine. They were poison, and this boat ride was never romantic. It was her execution. But this story did not begin here. Now, before we dive into how Victoria survived her own murder and came back to destroy the man who tried to erase her, please subscribe to our channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. To understand Victoria's journey, we must go back to where it all started. The boat rocked gently on the ebb waters, and the morning sun painted the Lagos skyline in shades of gold and orange. Victoria sat at the edge of the small wooden vessel, her fingers trailing through the cool water, and she smiled because moments like this reminded her why she married Daniel in the first place. He stood behind her, steering them deeper into the river, and his face was calm, almost too calm, but she didn't notice because she trusted him with every fiber of her being. This is beautiful, she said, turning to look at him, and her voice was soft with genuine happiness. Thank you for bringing me out here, Daniel. I needed this. Daniel smiled back, but his eyes were cold, empty, and when she turned away again to face the water, that smile vanished completely. He gripped the wooden steering handle tighter, and his jaw clenched because today was the day he had been planning for 3 long months, and there was no turning back now. Victoria didn't know that the man she loved had been slowly killing her. She didn't know that every morning when she took her blood pressure medication, she was swallowing pills Daniel had carefully replaced with something else, something that weakened her little by little until even climbing the stairs left her breathless. She thought it was stress from work, maybe exhaustion, but it was him, and it had always been him. Are you feeling okay? Daniel asked, and his voice dripped with false concern. You look a bit pale. Victoria pressed a hand to her chest and nodded slowly. I'm fine, she said, but she wasn't fine, and deep down she knew it. Just a little tired, I think. I've been so weak lately, Daniel. Maybe I should see the doctor again. You worry too much, he said quickly, and his tone was dismissive because the last thing he needed was another doctor asking questions. You just need rest. That's why we're here, remember, to relax. She wanted to believe him, so she did, and that trust would cost her everything. The boat drifted further from the shore, and the water beneath them grew darker, deeper, and more dangerous. Daniel glanced around, making sure they were far enough, and when he saw that no other boats were nearby, his heart began to race, not with fear but with anticipation. This was it. This was the moment. Victoria, he called out, and his voice was suddenly urgent. Come here for a second, I need your help with something. She stood up carefully because her legs felt shaky, weaker than they should, and she moved toward him, trusting him like she always did. When she reached him, he stepped aside and pointed at the boat's edge. Can you check if the rope is tied properly? He asked, and his hand hovered near her back. I think it's loose. Victoria bent down to look, and in that split second, Daniel's face twisted into something dark, something evil, and without hesitation, he shoved her with both hands, hard and merciless. She gasped as her body flew forward, and the world tilted violently before the cold water swallowed her whole. The shock stole her breath, and she went under, flailing desperately because she couldn't understand what had just happened. When she surfaced, gasping and choking, she saw Daniel staring down at her from the boat, and his face was blank, emotionless, like he was watching a stranger drown. Daniel, she screamed, and her voice cracked with terror. Help me, please. He said nothing. He just stood there watching her struggle, and then he turned away and steered the boat further out, leaving her alone in the middle of the river. Victoria's arms thrashed in the water, but her body was so weak, too weak, and every movement felt like lifting concrete blocks. The poisoning had done its job, and now the river was finishing what Daniel had started. Tears mixed with the river water on her face, and she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Why, she whispered, but the river swallowed her words and no one answered. Meanwhile, Daniel drove the boat several meters away, and when he was sure he was far enough, he deliberately tilted it until water rushed in and the vessel began to sink. He grabbed onto a floating plank and kicked away from the boat, swimming with strong, practiced strokes toward the riverbank. When he reached the shore, he stumbled onto the muddy ground, gasping for air, and people rushed toward him immediately. "Help," Daniel shouted, and his voice was filled with panic that he didn't feel. "My wife, the boat capsized, she's still in the water." Men and women gathered around him, some wrapping him in cloths, others shouting orders, and within minutes a search party was formed. Boats launched into the river, diving into the murky depths, searching desperately for Victoria's body, but they found nothing, absolutely nothing, because the current had already carried her far away. Daniel sat on the riverbank, his head in his hands, and he cried loud, heartbreaking sobs that convinced everyone watching that he was a devastated husband who had just lost the love of his life. But inside he was smiling, because finally she was gone. Back in the water, Victoria was fading fast. Her limbs felt like lead and her lungs burned with every desperate breath. The current dragged her downstream, further and further from the search party, and she knew with a sinking certainty that she was going to die here, alone, betrayed by the man she loved more than anything. Just as her head dipped under the surface one final time, and darkness began creeping into the edges of her vision, she heard voices, distant but real. "There, I see something. Paddle faster, James, faster." Two fishermen in a small boat spotted her limp body floating face down, and they raced toward her with every ounce of strength they had. The older one, a man named Solomon with graying hair and scars that told stories of a harder life, reached into the water and grabbed her arm just as she was about to slip under completely. "Hold on," Solomon shouted, and his voice was urgent, commanding, the voice of a man who had once barked orders on military battlefields. "James, help me pull her up, now." Together, they dragged Victoria's unconscious body into their boat, and water poured from her mouth and nose. Solomon pressed his hands against her chest, pumping rhythmically, desperately, because even though he didn't know this woman, he refused to let death win today. "Come on," he whispered, and his voice was almost a prayer. "Breathe, just breathe." Victoria's body convulsed, and she coughed violently, spitting up river water, and her eyes fluttered open for just a second before closing again. She was alive, barely, but alive. "Get us to shore," Solomon ordered, and James paddled with everything he had. "We need to get her home, now." As they raced toward the opposite riverbank, far away from the search party, far away from Daniel's lies, Victoria lay unconscious in the bottom of their boat, her chest rising and falling in shallow, fragile breaths. On the other side of the river, Daniel stood up slowly, wiping fake tears from his face, and someone patted his shoulder sympathetically. "We'll keep searching," the man said, "but brother, with this current, you need to prepare yourself." Daniel nodded, his face a mask of grief, but inside he was already planning his next move. He would claim her properties, transfer everything into his name, and finally bring Jessica, his girlfriend, out of the shadows and into the life they both deserved. Victoria was dead, he was sure of it. But as the fishermen's boat disappeared around a bend in the river, carrying Victoria's broken body to safety, one truth hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Was this really the end of Victoria's story, or just the beginning of Daniel's nightmare? The river had witnessed his crime, and soon, very soon, it would demand justice. Victoria's body lay motionless on the worn bamboo mat, and her chest barely moved with each shallow breath. Solomon knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers against her neck to check her pulse, and his weathered face creased with concern because this woman was fighting for her life, and he had seen enough death in his military days to know when someone was on the edge. "Is she going to make it?" James asked, and his voice trembled with worry. He was younger, maybe 25, and he had never seen someone so close to death before. "She's breathing," Solomon said, but his tone was cautious because breathing wasn't enough. "But she's weak, very weak. Something's not right with her body. This isn't just drowning." Their small riverside house was simple, built with wood and zinc roofing, and it sat isolated on the quieter side of the Ep River, far from the main fishing communities. Solomon's wife, Mama Tund, rushed in with warm blankets and a pot of hot water, and her eyes widened when she saw Victoria's pale, lifeless face. "Aya, this poor woman," Mama Tund whispered, and she immediately began wrapping Victoria in dry cloths. "What kind of trouble has she seen? Look at her, Solomon, she's like a ghost." Victoria's eyelids fluttered, and a soft moan escaped her lips, but she didn't wake up, and her body shivered violently despite the blankets. Solomon noticed something else too, something that made his soldier instincts kick in. Her fingernails had a strange discoloration, and her skin looked almost jaundiced, and these weren't signs of drowning alone. "We need to watch her closely," Solomon said, and he stood up, his tall frame casting a shadow over Victoria's fragile body. If she doesn't wake up by tomorrow, we'll take her to the clinic in town. But tomorrow felt like a lifetime away. Across the river, back in their luxurious Lecky home, Daniel stood in the master bedroom, and his hands moved quickly, methodically, as he pulled Victoria's documents from the drawer. Her land titles, her bank statements, her company registration papers, everything that proved she owned anything, and he spread them across the bed like a man counting his winnings. Jessica walked in, and she was beautiful in a sharp, calculated way, with her expensive wig and designer clothes that Victoria's money had paid for in secret. She leaned against the doorframe and smiled, and her voice was light, almost playful. "Is it done?" she asked, and there was no sadness in her tone, no remorse, only excitement. Daniel looked up and grinned, and his eyes gleamed with something dark and victorious. "She's gone, Jessica. The search party found nothing, and by tomorrow everyone will accept that she drowned. It's over." Jessica walked toward him slowly, and her heels clicked against the marble floor, and when she reached him, she picked up one of Victoria's property documents and held it up to the light. "All of this," she said softly, "is ours now." "All of it," Daniel confirmed, and he pulled her close, kissing her hard, and they laughed together because they had won, or so they thought. The next morning, Daniel went to the police station, and his face was a perfect mask of grief. His eyes were red from rubbing them, and his voice broke at just the right moments as he filed the missing persons report. "My wife," he said, and he choked on the words like they hurt to say. "She fell into the river when our boat capsized. I tried to save her, but the current, it was too strong. Please, you have to find her body. I need to bury her properly." The officer behind the desk looked at him with sympathy, and he nodded slowly. "We understand, Mr. Daniel. The search team is still looking, but you know how the river is. Sometimes it doesn't give back what it takes." Daniel nodded, wiping fake tears from his face, and inside he was smiling because this performance was Oscar-worthy. He left the station with his head down, playing the devastated husband perfectly, and by the time he got home, news of Victoria's drowning had already spread through their neighborhood like wildfire. Friends came to the house with condolences, bringing food and prayers, and Daniel received them all with a heavy heart and trembling hands. Jessica stayed hidden in the guest house at the back of the compound, watching through the window. And she was smart enough to know that her time would come soon, but not yet, not while people were still watching. Meanwhile, at Solomon's house, Victoria's eyes finally opened. The world came into focus slowly, blurry at first, and then she saw the wooden ceiling above her, heard the sound of water lapping against the shore outside, and smelled something cooking, something simple and earthy. Confusion crashed over her like a wave, and she tried to sit up, but her body screamed in protest, and she collapsed back onto the mat with a groan. "Easy now," a calm voice said, and Solomon appeared beside her holding a cup of water. "Don't move too fast. You almost died out there." Victoria stared at him, and her mind was foggy, struggling to piece together what had happened. The boat, the water, Daniel's face staring down at her with cold, dead eyes. "Daniel," she whispered, and her voice was hoarse-broken. "Where's Daniel?" Solomon exchanged a glance with Mama Tund, and his expression darkened. "We pulled you out of the river yesterday," he said carefully. "You were alone, no one else was with you." Victoria's breath hitched, and suddenly, like a dam breaking, everything came flooding back. The push, the betrayal, the feeling of water filling her lungs while Daniel just watched, sailed away, left her to die. Her hands flew to her face, and she began to sob deep, wrenching cries that shook her entire body. "He pushed me," she gasped between sobs, and her words were barely coherent. "My husband. He pushed me into the river. He tried to kill me." Mama Tun's hand flew to her mouth, and her eyes filled with tears, and Solomon's jaw tightened because he had suspected something was wrong, but hearing it out loud made his blood boil. He had fought in wars, seen men betray their brothers for less, but this was something else entirely. "Are you sure?" Solomon asked, and his voice was gentle but firm because he needed to know the truth. "Are you absolutely sure he pushed you?" Victoria looked up at him, and her eyes were filled with a pain so raw, so devastating, that it answered his question before she even spoke. "I'm sure," she whispered. "I felt his hands on my back, I saw his face, he didn't even try to help me, he just left me there to die." Solomon clenched his fists, and his mind was already racing, calculating, because this wasn't just attempted murder. This was something planned, something deliberate, and men like Daniel didn't act without a reason. "Why?" he asked. "Why would he want you dead?" Victoria shook her head slowly, and more tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't know," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, pieces began clicking into place. The way Daniel had insisted she take her medication every morning. The way he always watched her swallow the pills. The way she had grown weaker and weaker over the past few months, and he had dismissed every concern, every question. "Oh God," she breathed, and her eyes widened with horrifying realization. The medication, he was doing something to my medication. Solomon leaned forward and his eyes were sharp, focused. What do you mean? I have high blood pressure, Victoria explained, and her voice trembled. I've been taking medication for years, but a few months ago, Daniel started bringing my pills to me every morning. He said he wanted to help to make sure I didn't forget. But I started feeling worse, not better. Weaker, tired all the time. He was poisoning you, Solomon said, and it wasn't a question, it was a statement because everything made sense now. Slowly, so no one would suspect. And when you were weak enough, he took you out on that boat and finished the job, or tried to. Victoria covered her face with her hands, and her whole body shook because the man she loved, the man she had trusted with everything, had spent months planning her death, and she had been too blind to see it. What do I do? She whispered, and her voice was small, broken. How do I prove it? How do I go back? Solomon placed a firm hand on her shoulder, and his voice was steady, commanding, the voice of a man who had led soldiers into battle and brought them home alive. You don't go back, he said. Not yet. Not until you're strong again, and not until we have a plan, because right now he thinks you're dead, and that's the only advantage you have. Victoria looked up at him, and through her tears she saw something in his eyes, something that gave her the smallest flicker of hope. This man, this stranger who had saved her life, was offering to help her, and for the first time since hitting the water, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she might survive this after all. But back in Lekki, Daniel was already moving forward with his plan. He sat in his lawyer's office, and his face was somber as he explained that his wife had tragically drowned, and he needed to start the process of claiming her estate. It's too soon, the lawyer said carefully, and he looked uncomfortable. The body hasn't even been found yet, Daniel. We need to wait at least a few weeks before we can declare her legally dead. I understand, Daniel said, and his voice was smooth, patient. But I need to secure her assets, make sure everything is protected. You understand, don't you? It's what she would have wanted. The lawyer hesitated, but eventually he nodded. And Daniel walked out of that office knowing that within a month, maybe two, everything Victoria owned would legally belong to him, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Jessica was waiting for him in the car, and when he slid into the driver's seat, she looked at him with eager eyes. Well, she asked. It's happening, Daniel said, and he started the engine. Soon, baby, very soon all of this will be ours. They drove back to the house, and as they passed through the gates, Jessica looked up at the mansion, and she imagined herself as the lady of the house, hosting parties, spending money, living the life she had always deserved. But neither of them knew that across the river, in a small wooden house, Victoria was slowly regaining her strength, and with every passing hour, her grief was hardening into something else, something dangerous. Could a dead woman rise from the water to reclaim everything she lost, or would Daniel's lies bury her forever? The countdown to his reckoning had already begun. 2 months had passed since Solomon and James pulled Victoria from the river, and in that time she had transformed from a dying woman into someone who could walk, eat, and think clearly again. The colour had returned to her cheeks, and her hands no longer trembled when she reached for things, but the nightmares never stopped. And every night she woke up gasping, feeling Daniel's hands on her back, seeing his cold eyes watching her drown. Solomon sat across from her on the small wooden veranda, and the morning sun painted orange streaks across the river. He had been watching her closely these past weeks, and he recognized the look in her eyes because he had seen it before in soldiers who had survived ambushes. She wasn't just healing physically, she was planning something, and he needed to know what. You're getting stronger, Solomon said, and his voice was calm, measured. But I can see it in your face, Victoria. You want to go back. Victoria looked up at him and her jaw tightened because he was right, and there was no point denying it. I have to, she said, and her voice was firm, steady. He took everything from me, Solomon, my home, my businesses, my life. I can't just sit here and let him get away with it. Solomon leaned forward and his expression was serious, almost stern. And what will you do when you get there? Walk up to your house and knock on the door, tell the police your husband tried to kill you. You think they'll believe you? Why wouldn't they? Victoria shot back and frustration crept into her tone. I'm alive, I'm the proof. You're proof of nothing, Solomon said bluntly, and his words hit her like a slap. You have no evidence, Victoria, no witnesses, no medical records showing he poisoned you. All you have is your word against his, and right now, he's the grieving husband who lost his wife in a tragic accident. The whole of Lagos feels sorry for him. Victoria's hands clenched into fists, and her nails dug into her palms because she knew he was right, and that truth was suffocating. So what am I supposed to do? She asked, and her voice cracked with desperation. Just stay hidden forever, pretend I'm dead while he lives in my house with his mistress. Solomon's eyes widened slightly, His mistress, he repeated, and his tone sharpened. You didn't mention that before. Victoria looked away and shame washed over her because admitting it out loud made the betrayal feel even more real. I suspected, she said quietly. There were signs, little things. Late nights at work, phone calls he'd take outside, perfume on his shirts that wasn't mine. But I loved him, so I ignored it. I trusted him. That trust almost killed you, Solomon said, and there was no judgment in his voice, only fact. But if he has a mistress, then that's our angle. That's how we prove motive. Victoria's head snapped up and hope flickered in her eyes. What do you mean? Solomon stood up and walked to the edge of the veranda, and his mind was already working, piecing together a strategy like he used to do in the military. If he has another woman, then chances are she's already moved into your life. She's probably wearing your clothes, sleeping in your bed, spending your money. People notice things like that, Victoria. Neighbors, friends, business associates. Someone has seen something. So we investigate, Victoria said, and her voice grew stronger. We find out who she is, how long they've been together, and we use that to expose him. Exactly, Solomon said, and he turned to face her. But it has to be done carefully, quietly. If he finds out you're alive before we're ready, he'll disappear, or worse, he'll come after you again, and this time he won't fail. Victoria nodded slowly, and determination burned in her chest. Then let's start now, she said. Tell me what I need to do. Solomon pulled out his old military phone, the kind that couldn't be traced easily, and he handed it to her. First, we need information. Do you have any friends you can trust? Anyone who might know what's been happening in your absence? Victoria thought for a moment, and then her eyes lit up. Grace, she said. Grace Okafor. She's been my best friend since university. She lives 2 streets away from my house, and she knows everything about my life, or at least she used to. Call her, Solomon said. But be careful what you say. Don't tell her you're alive, not yet. Just find out what she knows about Daniel. Victoria's hands trembled as she dialed Grace's number, and her heart pounded in her chest because she hadn't heard her friend's voice in 2 months, and she didn't know what to expect. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, and then Grace's familiar voice came through, bright and cheerful. Hello. Victoria almost broke down right there, but she steadied herself and disguised her voice slightly, making it deeper, rougher. Hello, is this Grace Okafor? She asked. Yes, who's this? Grace replied, and there was curiosity in her tone. I'm calling from the insurance company handling Victoria Adami's estate, Victoria lied, and the words felt bitter on her tongue. We're trying to finalize some paperwork, and we need to verify a few details about her husband, Daniel Adami. You were listed as a close friend. There was a long pause, and then Grace's voice came back, quieter now, sadder. Victoria was my best friend, she said. I still can't believe she's gone. It's been so hard on all of us. I understand, Victoria said, and she fought to keep her voice steady. We just need to confirm Mr. Adami's current living situation. Is he still residing at the same address? Yes, Grace said, but there was something in her tone, something bitter. He's still there, and so is his girlfriend. Victoria's breath caught, and Solomon leaned closer, listening intently. His girlfriend? Victoria asked, playing dumb. Jessica, Grace said, and disgust dripped from her voice. Jessica Nduka. She moved in 2 weeks after Victoria died. Can you imagine, 2 weeks? Everyone in the neighborhood is talking about it. It's shameful, absolutely shameful. Victoria's body hasn't even been found yet, and he's already parading this woman around like she's the new queen of the house. Victoria's hand gripped the phone so tight her knuckles turned white, and rage boiled in her veins. 2 weeks. He had waited only 2 weeks before bringing Jessica into their home, into their bed, into the life they had built together. Do you know how long they've been together? Victoria asked, and her voice shook despite her efforts to control it. Grace sighed. I don't know for sure, but some people are saying they've been seeing each other for at least 6 months, maybe longer. Honestly, I suspected something was going on even before Victoria died, but I never said anything because I didn't have proof, and I didn't want to hurt her. 6 months. Victoria's mind reeled because that meant Daniel had been planning this for at least that long, maybe even longer. The poisoning, the affair, the murder attempt, all of it was premeditated, calculated, and cold-blooded. Thank you for your time, Victoria said quickly, and she ended the call before Grace could ask any more questions. She handed the phone back to Solomon, and her whole body was shaking, not with fear but with fury. He brought her into my house, she whispered, and tears streamed down her face. 2 weeks, Solomon, he didn't even wait 2 weeks. Solomon placed a hand on her shoulder, and his grip was firm, grounding. Now you know the truth, he said, and now we can use it, but Victoria, listen to me, you need to control this anger. Rage will make you reckless, and recklessness will get you killed. Victoria wiped her tears away, and she nodded because she knew he was right. But controlling her rage felt impossible when all she wanted was to march back to Lagos and tear Daniel's world apart with her bare hands. "What's our next move?" she asked. Solomon thought for a moment, and his eyes narrowed with focus. "We need to document everything," he said. "Find out what properties he's transferred, what money he's moved, who he's been meeting with. I have contacts, people who owe me favors from my military days. I'll reach out to them quietly, see what we can dig up." "And what do I do?" Victoria asked. "You get stronger," Solomon said, "physically and mentally, because when the time comes to face him, you need to be ready for war, and trust me, Victoria, this will be war." Over the next few weeks, Solomon worked his connections, and information started trickling in. Daniel had already transferred 2 of Victoria's rental properties into his name, claiming they were joint assets from the marriage. He had emptied her business account, moved the funds into an offshore account, and he was in the process of selling her late father's land in Ikorodu, land that had been in her family for generations. Victoria listened to each new revelation, and with every piece of information, her resolve hardened. Daniel wasn't just a murderer, he was a thief, and he had spent months dismantling everything she had worked for, everything her family had left her, and he had done it all while pretending to love her. One evening, Solomon came back from town with a manila envelope, and his face was grim. "You need to see this," he said, and he spread several photographs across the table. Victoria looked down and her heart stopped. The photos showed Daniel and Jessica at a high-end restaurant in Victoria Island, laughing, holding hands, kissing. But what made her blood run cold was the date stamp on the photos. They were taken 4 months before the boat incident, which meant Daniel and Jessica had been openly dating while Victoria was still alive, still in the house, still trusting him. "He wasn't even hiding it," Victoria whispered, and her voice was hollow. "He didn't care." "No," Solomon agreed. "He didn't because he already knew you were going to die. In his mind, you were already gone." Victoria looked up at Solomon, and her eyes were hard, cold, filled with something dangerous. "I want him to pay," she said. "I want him to lose everything, just like he made me lose everything." Solomon nodded slowly. "Then we keep going," he said. "We build the case piece by piece until we have enough to bury him. But Victoria, you need to understand something. When you step back into that world, when you reveal yourself, there's no going back. He will fight, and he will fight dirty." "Let him fight," Victoria said, and her voice was ice. "I died in that river, Solomon. The woman I was, the woman who trusted him, she's gone. What came out of that water is someone else, someone who won't stop until he pays for what he did." Solomon studied her face, and he saw the transformation, saw the survivor replacing the victim, and he nodded with respect. "Good," he said, "because that's the only way you're going to win this." But across the river in Lekki, Daniel stood in his bedroom, now fully decorated with Jessica's touches, and he stared at himself in the mirror. Life was perfect. The properties were his, the money was his, and Victoria was dead, buried somewhere at the bottom of the Ep River, forgotten. Jessica walked up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Daniel smiled. "Nothing," he said, "just thinking about how everything worked out exactly the way it was supposed to." "You're a genius," Jessica purred, and she kissed his neck. "No one suspects a thing." But as Daniel looked at his reflection, for just a split second he thought he saw something in the background, a shadow, a figure, something that looked almost like Victoria, and his heart skipped a beat. He spun around quickly, but there was nothing there, just empty space. "You okay?" Jessica asked, concerned. "Yeah," Daniel said, but his voice was tight. "Yeah, I'm fine." But he wasn't fine, because somewhere deep in his gut, a primal instinct was whispering a warning he couldn't quite hear. Had Daniel really buried his past in the river, or was the ghost of his sins already rising to haunt him? The dead were supposed to stay dead, but Victoria had other plans. If you enjoyed the first part of this story, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notification bell. So when part 2 drops, you'll be the first to know. And hey, drop a comment below and tell me what country you're watching from. Let's see how far this tale is traveling across the world.